everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is John Sarakis, and you are either watching or listening to The Climb, which is a digital mastermind production. So this is brought to you by the Digital Mastermind, and that is a group of agency owners, marketers, technologists that continually collaborate in our group, which consists of bi-weekly phone calls. There's monthly phone calls. Anybody in your agency can join, from the owner level all the way down to the intern. It's a small monthly subscription. And we stay in continual contact via Slack. I mentioned the phone calls. We have a yearly meeting, which is sold out, which is awesome. That's going to be in Vegas this year. So if you want to be a part of that, go ahead and shoot me an email, John, Jon at digitalmastermind.com, or check us out at digitalmastermind.com. And one big favor I ask is if you could interact with the show in any way, leave us a review. Love those. Comment on any of the posts that you see this on and share it with anybody that you might think would get some type of benefit from this. Be greatly appreciated. Today, we had the opportunity to interview a fantastic person by the name of Larry English. He was recommended by a good friend and a great friend of the show, Jeff Nishwitz, who's produced again. And we talked a lot about what his book, he's a published author, his company, which has 1,100 employees, and remote work, which is something that we've mentioned on the show before, but this is a little bit more in depth because he started a company over 20 years ago, which was light years ahead of it. So let me bring my co-host out here. Dave, why don't you come out here?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well, man. Just got better because you're here. So with this guest, remote work, it's on our minds. We're talking about it a lot. Hell, you and I are even talking about it a lot because we're trying to figure out what we're doing with our offices. But from your point of view, share with our audience your perspective on this, from where it was to where it is now and potentially where it's going.
So I've been on both sides of the coin here as an employee and an employer, allowing work at home. As an employee, I liked it, but I got bored of it. It wasn't the greatest thing, but I was at a different time in my life. I was, I don't know. I just didn't enjoy. I missed the camaraderie, and I always felt like I was stuck in the house all day, every day. Now you'll see that I'm in the office right now, even though we're not asking our employees to come in, because even now, where I could work from home, I prefer to be in the office. I'm more focused. I'm more interested in work when I'm at the office. So that's why I like coming in the office. But in this new world, our employees aren't coming back, and we're not going to change the rule. We're going to say, be where you're most productive.
Yeah, and I think it's what I need, because I never had the opportunity to work from home. It just wasn't something that was there. But I need that change of state. I always have. I do not like working at home. I never even really like studying at home. But home is for other things other than work for me.
Right.
And where I see potentially the future of this going, we talk about that a little bit with Larry, is it's going to be that hybrid, right? So co-working spaces, or just whatever that change of state is for a lot of people, is what's going to be embraced.
Yeah, I mean, again, some people, different strokes for different folks, right? I mean, people operate differently, and we just saw in the news Apple trying to bring back their employees into the office, and we saw some resistance from their employees, and they're leaving to go find companies that are just permanent work from homes now. And my biggest thing was culture. How do you maintain the culture? If you're a small agency, even a medium-sized agency, and you're purely work at home now, how do you maintain the culture and the camaraderie of the team? And Larry kind of pioneered and talked about that quite a bit.
Yeah, he did. And I think when I mean by that change of state and the thing that relates to culture and what affected Apple, it's people want control. And that's that semblance of control. I can work when I want is going to be the next thing. Right now, it's I can work wherever I want, right? And to keep culture with that, I think it just goes a lot back to which he touched on and somewhat we've spoke to a lot of others about. It's really those core values and making sure that those are aligned, and then having the proper check-ins necessary. But there's the tension, the the positive friction that's created between teammates. I don't know what that looks like moving forward, and I want that. I want that to be something that we discovered. Maybe we just need more time with it until we get there.
Speaking of where you want to work, a lot of countries, especially in South America and Central America, have created special visas for digital nomads for like 1 year work visas so that you can go live, stay there for a year, since everyone, which was genius and for these small countries that said, hey, if everyone's going to be locked down, if everyone's going to be working from home, why don't you work from home in paradise and spend your money here and, increase our economy? So I watched a podcast. I can't remember what it was called, but she just went around the world documenting like cost of living for, the Wi-Fi, how good the internet connections are, so you can work and find your ideal, foreign place to just check out while you're working from home.
That's cool. I think we're going to see a lot more of that because there's multiple people that didn't have the income as some did to take that study abroad or
Right.
that backpacking through Europe. So they're like, all right, I'm going to do it now. I got some funds and the capabilities are there. So why not?
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, hell, I might do it. I just wouldn't know what to do with my dog.
Right.
My wife would be more than happy, but yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of places that require quarantine that wouldn't make too much sense. Little baby Arlo just sitting in, somewhere for 3 months isn't going to happen.
Nope.
But yeah, I think that we as I don't know, business leaders, people in companies, nobody has the answer. Nobody knows, and it's just going to be this thing that we all adapt to and reshape. But at the end of the day, I think if people are happy with where they're working and they get their work done, management's happy, the company's making a profit, does it really even matter?
Look, this is a lifestyle business we're running, and I want it to produce the lifestyle that we want to live, and that includes the employees. And if that's the lifestyle they want, I want to cater it to them, and I want to make sure that they're happy doing good work for the company and for our clients, and I want to make sure our clients are clients we want to work with. And like when you think about a lifestyle company, it really is from top to bottom. We want to be happy and healthy, and I want people to want to work here because, it's a good lifestyle.
I think all companies are having to form that type of relationship, though. If you have a poor lifestyle, you're just going to burn through people, and you need that reflection, that transparency to understand, like, okay, if you want a bullshit company where you just preach all these things and everybody's miserable, the internet's going to expose that, whether it's going to be on or any of your reviews, outside of the people that are just going to talk to each other, maybe message like, hey, does this really suck for you too? So yeah, I think that's definitely the future. You have to treat people like humans, treat them like you want to be treated, and things will tend to work out. Like, it's just making a profit while you do it.
Even just along those lines, we've been talking about adding benefits that are unconventional, that really talk to the lifestyle that we want people to be able to live. And I think that's going to be a key indicator in the future. Is it's going to be like interesting benefits. Like we were talking about buying a lake house that anyone in the company can use. I think that would be a tremendous asset if you had that kind of company and those kind of people that are working for you. So
yeah, the idea is having people that you trust with a lake house.
Yeah.
So right. Yeah, you're not going to bring any, like when somebody's walking into the door, you're interviewing them or via Zoom now. The whole time you're thinking, are they going to trash the bathroom at the lake house?
Right.
That's an interesting. Yeah, I believe everybody on our team right now would take care of the proverbial lake house. Yeah. So yeah, and I think it's a lot of things like that, and just really giving people what it is that they want, and also staying in communication. Right? There's continual check-ins with people. Those yearly events. We're doing a yearly event. We're doing a party on a boat, which that's going to be badass. So now we have our Christmas party at one time, and then now we have our summer party, and it's more than just a celebration. It's a check-in where we get to just experience each other in person. Really feel each other's rhythms, So those are things that are absolutely necessary.
And that's something Larry talked about, is that they have, they bring everybody together, and he's got a much larger organization. It's much more expensive for him to bring everyone together and do, big events. But I'm super excited about getting on the Sabrage. It's a really nice looking boat. It's going to be fun.
The Sabrage.
Yeah.
So I think without any further ado, we should let our listeners and watchers get into this. Everybody, this is an interview with Larry English, the author of Office Optional: How to Build a Connected Culture with Virtual Teams. He's also one of the owners and founders of Centric Consulting. And please have a listen, take a look, and let us know what you think about your relationship with remote working at your organization. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So with all of our other guests, the one question I'd like to start out with is, what does your climb look like, your journey? How did you get here?
Sure. So out of college, I went to work for one of the big international consulting firms, and I was working 100 hours a week for 5 years straight. And I was like, I'm going to die. This is not good. And so I had a midlife crisis at 25, and my newlywed wife and I bought a one-way ticket to Iceland, and we kept going around the world for a year. Oh. And the whole point of it was for me to kind of find myself and find my path in life, because I knew that wasn't going to be it. And so it came to me kind of on a beach in Bali, that I wanted to be an entrepreneur and take risk with my life because I think I would regret it. And so came back and did a series of startups and learned a lot of what not to do. And so after like the third company and different business models, I reconnected with some guys that I'd worked with right out of college, and we shared the same value system, and we thought we could build a consulting company that hadn't existed before. And so we tried to get rid of all the bad stuff that was in consulting and keep all the good stuff. And one of those ideas that we had when we were doing this was, we thought, hey, if we could be remote, we think our employees would be happier and they could live a better lifestyle. And so we started as a remote company 20 years ago. And then what happened was I kept having to explain to people how a remote company worked and how you could be successful at it. And then so I started to write a book on how to have a great culture and be remote. And then the pandemic happened right when I was getting ready to publish the book. And then since then, people have obviously wanted to ask a lot of questions of how to do that.
Right on. And curious, I definitely want to talk about the remote work, your book. But before that, what were some of the bad things in consulting that you and your partners laid out?
Yeah, so there were a number of things. So one was the notion of the need to have work-life balance and not killing people for profit. So we thought our people would be better off if they had better balance in their life. So they had, it wasn't all about work. They could take vacation. And so that's one of the ideas that we came up with remote. And we made it a core value that we were going to ensure that everybody lived the work-life balance that they wanted to. A couple others that are out there is we did not want to be publicly traded, and we didn't want to sell the company. So we set it up to be multi-generational. And the reason we did that is we saw in a lot of services firms that were publicly traded, it was all about the numbers. It was all about hitting your numbers every 13 weeks to beat the street and grow at all costs. And it didn't lead to client or employee happiness. And so we thought it would be better if we focused everything we did around employee and client happiness. And out of that has grown a lot of our core values.
I love that. 20 years ago, what were people saying to you when you're like, hey, we should all just work from home?
I don't think you want me to say it out loud on your podcast.
You can say anything you want, man.
They said you are a crazy person. Will be the shortest version of it. People just could not conceive. And up until the pandemic, so we could start to see about, let's say 10 years ago, we could start to see that technology was getting a lot better, and that clients were getting more accepting of remote work. And we could easily see about 15 years out where this was the way you did business, that you would have remote. And and then the pandemic happened and it accelerated that by 10 or 15 years. And then it proved out that you could trust your employees. and that remote you could have a great culture. It could absolutely work.
So when it comes to culture, that's my biggest concern, because just to lay it out, Dave and I were not proponents of remote work. We didn't really believe in it. It was just kind of one of those fringe concepts. And of course, we were forced into it, and we've now understood that, yeah, this really does work. But the culture piece, like, how do you foster that culture?
So I wrote the entire book on how to do that specifically. So when I did this, I looked around and there was very little written about, there was a lot written on how to be remote, but not about how to be remote and have a great culture. And so the book is meant to be a how-to guide, like 10 chapters that step by step walk you through how to do that. And we can just talk about a few of the highlights right now. So there's a couple. So one is starting with trust as the underlying foundation of any remote culture. And what I mean by that is, before the pandemic, most CEOs are like, I don't think I can trust my workers to work remotely. They're going to goof off. And what we found is, working with thousands of workers, what happens is people end up working too much is the issue. And so you need to actually design training to help them not work as much. So starting with trust. And then the next thing I would say is, it is all about, you can build the same deep personal relationships with people remote that you can in the office, but you have to go about it a little different. You have to build that into how you operate your company. And so I'll give you a few examples. Is we do things to make it all about building deep personal connections with people remotely. And so as an example, we model vulnerability as a company in our leadership, because vulnerability is the shortcut to trust. And we work on not only talking about business, but we work on building deep personal relationships with everybody. And so as an example, we'll facilitate sessions where it's not about business, it's about getting to know that person. And there's this one exercise that we've used where you hand out red, green, and yellow questions. And the green ones are like, they're softballs, like, what's your favorite sports team? And then the red ones are, what are your greatest fear in life? And so by getting to that, when you get to know everybody at that personal level, it doesn't matter if you're going in the office or not, you're going to have this deep connection with people, and you're going to have a better culture. Does that help? I know that we could probably spend 2 hours talking about it. Does that give you a little bit of a sense?
It does, yeah. So it sounds like you start with kind of a deep one-on-one session
with everybody.
So it's
so let me give you an example. Like, when a new leadership person joins, we'll have a list of other people in the organization 30, 60, 90 days out that they're supposed to go meet. And not just meet and say, hey, what do you do in the business? It's about getting to know them as a person. We encourage people to bring their whole self to work, because the more you know about that person as an individual, you're going to have a tighter connection with them. And so, just keeping going. So being remote does not mean that you don't get together in person. So we've overlaid an entire gathering strategy of when we get together. So as an example, we'll get together in the US, we'll get all of our employees together 3 times a year. And it is all, when we're getting together, it's, yes, we talk about some business stuff, but it is more about designing those interactions to deepen connections and reinforce culture. So it's really hard to measure the ROI on the expense of doing that, but we know that people become so much more energized, and they feel so much more closer and connected, and it reinforces those relationships that you've built virtually throughout the year.
Got it. Do you see having an office as any value?
Yes. So I'll give you some examples, and because a lot of companies are going through this right now. We found that when we hired right out of college, those folks who had never worked in a business environment, we were having a hard time. And that's an example of where you might want to have office space. We've had situations where our clients demanded it for some security risks and that sort of thing. But they had really sensitive data. But here's what happens is the better that you get as a company at working remote and asynchronously and all the stuff that we talked about how to build relationships and manage a company virtually, you find you need an office less and less. And so as an example, we had, we lease office space, obviously, occasionally. We had one office and I went there and it's completely dark every time I went there because there was nobody going in there. You don't need it as much. And I suspect that's what's going to happen with a lot of organizations. The better they get at it, they're going to probably continue to reduce their office space.
Yeah, that's what I wonder is everybody's going to go remote. And then is that going to be a positive differentiator in the future where it's like, oh, hey, yeah, we're one of 10 in our industry that has an office?
Oh, the other way. I
saw
don't.
the remote work 20 years down the road. Tell me what's in the future, Larry.
Well, what's interesting. So we were watching. I'll try and answer that. We were watching during the pandemic. There were a few early adopters, but we were working with a lot of organizations, and they were polling their employees. And their employees, it was around 5% that were like, "Hey, I want to come back into the office 5 days a week." Everybody else is like, we love this. I'll come in sometimes. Even I'm a really extroverted person, I'm going to be in more often, but I still want this option to do that. And so we were like, oh, this is going to be a problem. The more companies that start to adopt this, the easier it is for people to go wherever, they offer that. And that's exactly how it's played out. And so we're seeing what's interesting is McKinsey published an article, a research paper last week. They said 9 out of 10 companies will adopt a hybrid work model. And I have one customer that's mad at me right now because I'm advocating that this is how things are going to play out. And they're like, we don't want to go that direction. We want everybody back in the office. And so we've had multiple clients that have dictated it. And they've lost, like one company lost 10 people right away. One of them lost one of their entire technology teams because they're like, we're going to work for these other companies. Even the federal government last week, I think it was, or the week before, announced that they're going to allow permanent hybrid work from home. Microsoft published a paper that this is the transformation of our generation of how we do work, this great inflection point in the history of how work is done. And I think that's probably right. So I think very quickly you are going to lose employees unless you have a hybrid office option. And I think that's how it's going to play out for the next 3 to 4 years. What comes after that is murkier. But there's people that spend their time thinking about how that will transform cities and migration of workers. I think you're going to see some societal implications that come out of this, obviously, as well. And those are harder to predict, but they're going to be there.
Interesting. Do you have any predictions on some of those societal changes?
Yeah. So there's a guy, Robert Florida, I think he's a futurist that writes about a lot of that stuff. That, the idea that cities are not going to die, downtown is not going to die, but they'll be remade. So that certainly you'll have younger people that are craving that interaction. And the city will replicate some of those features of the office of where you get that social interaction and that sort of thing. You're definitely seeing the data points to people with families, kind of middle age, moving to the suburbs and wanting to work from there. And what the real estate people are saying, like New York, it's like on the dollar, dimes on the dollar for subleasing right now. And they're like, we're going to have to remake how buildings are used today that would maybe be more residential, those types of things. I think you'll definitely see that type of thing happening.
That's what they say is guiding the home improvement market so much is because everybody in the real estate market on the residential side, everybody's now working from home. They realize they need more space. They need different things based on everybody working there. So I can definitely see that.
That's exactly right.
So jumping kind of back to the culture side, I'm sure you're familiar with Basecamp, right? And what happened with them?
You mean the recent one where they didn't want political discussions to take place and people quit?
Right. So Do you think that maybe being in an office and having that type of scenario would potentially prevent that? Or is that an isolated situation based on somebody that, granted, they preach about remote work and culture a lot, and they just, it was just an outlier. They just had no idea and they just made a wrong decision.
I think that to me has nothing to do with remote work at all, or whether you're going to have that same issue whether you're remote or in the office. I think that is more of what we're seeing around all companies after the George Floyd event, which I think was a good thing, leaning into the diversity and inclusion conversation. But the broader trend that I see is one around transparency in an organization, in and out, and being a good and being a sustainable corporation. And that has many implications to it. What I think they did wrong is they instead of leaning into the dialogue and having everybody having a dialogue and talking about it, they tried to shut it down and say you can't talk about that. And I'll tell you, in our own organization, after the George Floyd event happened, some of our employees are like, because we try to be a big tent, we try to be apolitical. We want to have many different work, we're a consulting organization. It's a people asset business. So we want as many different opinions and viewpoints as we can under that. So after the George Floyd event, we leaned in and we had town halls in it. And we had people in tears, and I learned so much from it. Some of our Black employees are like, I never thought I could talk about this openly before. This is cathartic for me, and this is helpful for me. And so by leaning into that, I think we got closer as an organization and learned a lot from each other. And we learned how we can continue to grow to be a more diverse organization. So I think the mistake they made as a leadership team is they did not lean into it. They tried to shut it down.
Got it. All right. Yeah, that's good to know. And as far as leaning into it, so do you have like a forum or a tool that you use to monitor this, to say, hey, we need to have this discussion? What's that trigger point?
So what it led to for us was an entire initiative, what we call Centric Together, around multiple threads or streams. So we made it, I would say it is a strategic thrust of our business for us to be the best organization we can be. We need to be a more diverse organization. And we recognized there are multiple areas where we were falling short. And we've put in place kind of multiple teams to address those different areas. And we're very close to hiring a full-time person that'll be a diversity and inclusion lead for our organization to drive a lot of the stuff that's already underway.
So is it something like, and I guess what I'm saying is, like, is it something in the media? Like, what is the point where you're like, hey, we have to talk about this? And it could be a diversity inclusion. It could be, we want to ban rockets from going into space because it's too much of an environmental impact. Like, what does that look like? And the reason I ask that, I'm in the office and there's like just, there's talk, right? But over a year ago, I overhear them, right? And as a leader in the company, I then kind of interject myself into the conversation, maybe gracefully, or maybe they like it or not. That's kind of where I'm going. Like, so what does that look like? How are you monitoring that to act on it?
I think I see what you're saying now. Are you asking from a remote or just a general?
Remote mainly, yeah, because these are the culture things that, me being kind of a person that leads in some ways from gut and intuition and emotional intelligence, reading people that I may miss, right? That I'm not paying attention to. And so, yeah, is there a framework? Is there tools? Like, what does that look like?
So there's multiple things you need to design, systems you need to design into your company when you're remote. So one of them is both electronic and then a human feedback mechanism. So one is you want to design multiple survey tools to your point before, you want one of them to be anonymous because people, even when you have the most transparent organization in the world, people are like, you're my boss. I don't want to say that, I'm going to get singled out. And so you don't get that undercurrent of like what people are really thinking. And so by having those measurements in place, I can actually see where we have a culture problem in the organization based on the scores that are coming back at any one time. And that can be a pulse survey, that can be an annual survey, that can be any number of survey tools. The other thing that we do is we have what we call our voice of the employee team, and that is made up of rotating members around the company that are at different levels. And there's not a leadership person there, and they are there to talk about what's going on. And so you get that unfiltered how people are feeling or vibe, and they're throughout the organization, like, junior people that just started to senior people, and they're diverse, so that we're getting also kind of that real-time data. And the other way we use that group is if we're about to roll out a particular change in the organization and we're concerned that it might be controversial or how it might be received, we take it to that group, and they actually go out and they get feedback for us that's anonymous, and we can then use that. And then the Centric Together group that I mentioned, that is more around diversity. And so it's made up of people from all over the organization. And so they're hearing those conversations and it's bubbling up, and they're like, okay, here's the top 3 issues that we've got to work on. So hopefully that helps. We have multiple mechanisms in place to get that feedback and act on it.
Yep. No, that does. And yeah, what I'm referring to is just multiple times over the years walking by somebody's office and they're distraught. They're upset about something. And you just do that check-in, knowing when to do that check-in. And I think having that spur of the moment, they're not prepared for it. So there's a very open dialogue that occurs when that happens. So it sounds like you've had ways to replace that.
Yes. And the other thing I'll say is we used this book, Crucial Conversations, for a while. It's a little bit academic, but the techniques in it are great about how you have a hard conversation that might be emotional, which, political stuff can be emotional. And we've switched to something called social covenant. But the whole idea is allowing 2 people to have those deep, meaningful conversations where you come out of the relationship stronger. Where it might be something that's very, political or very high emotion, high stakes. And so we've been training everybody across the company to use that social covenant technique to have these conversations when you have a conflict with somebody.
What does that training look like?
It's about 2 hours, and really there are multiple out there. But it is almost a script or a technique of how you set up to have the conversation, and the agreements you have with each other about how you will have the conversation. So as an example, there is one thing that is, I will always share 100% of the truth during that conversation. You're not going to hold back. As an example. And so, and you don't, so you don't take it personally, and you come out of the conversation, completely understanding the other person's perspective, and hopefully have built your relationship.
Got it. So is there like a guarantee, like you can take the person that's far on the left and the far on the right, and they're going to be shaking hands and smiling after?
Maybe not that, but I think they will learn to respectfully. They may end up with a respectful disagreement, but they'll understand where that person's coming from a lot better, and they'll be able to work together better.
I love that. That's super interesting. I'd love to see more of that, because that can create unity where 2 people have opposing decisions and they don't make it a personal attack on the other, which I think could be huge for building the bonds necessary for a strong culture.
Exactly right.
You mentioned vulnerability earlier, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So what does that mean to you, and how do you employ that in your organization?
Sure. So vulnerability. So, and I'm a good example is, so I'm in this group of other CEOs, and they're like, "You suck at vulnerability." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Thank you." And it's true. It's like, when I was growing up in my family, we just didn't talk about hard stuff. Like you didn't talk about it. And so vulnerability to me is being fully transparent about how you're feeling, your hopes, your fears, an example might be, look, as a leader, I don't know what the right answer is to do here. I don't know what to do here, guys. I don't know what the right answer is. I need your help. So you are establishing trust, because people are like, oh, that person doesn't know either. And they're being honest about it, and they're being completely open. And I get it. I know to trust them, because when I'm going to them, I know they're going to tell me the truth about how they're feeling, and they're not, putting up some false front or air that they know everything that's going on. Does that help?
It does to some extent, yeah. And so I see that, and not trying to be, thinking absolutes, black and white, or right and wrong, but what is a question that you would ask versus a question you wouldn't ask? Like, when is the time to be steely and lead versus the time to be vulnerable and propose a question to the team? Is it always?
No, that's a great question. So as a leader, I think when you're debating what to do, that is, you're kicking things around. You're trying to solve a tough issue. When you're doing that, and it's in maybe a small group setting or a one-on-one setting, 100% vulnerability is huge. Mm-hmm. When you are communicating to the whole company, hey, we have this tough obstacle, we've talked about it, and this is how we're going to go do it. You can do that, and you can be vulnerable even then, but then transparent, saying, look, we don't know if this is going to work, but we've really looked at this hard, and we believe this is the right answer, and we need everybody to get behind it. Does that help? It
does, yeah. And I think that's a perfect answer that I was looking for. You also mentioned core values, right? So how did you develop your core values, and how do you employ them based on your culture?
Yeah. So we have not changed our core values since we wrote them 15, 20 years ago. And it was the conversation that we started with at the beginning, which is, what does your company stand for? And what's most important to how you're going to operate and treat each other? And when you come up with those, they're those guiding principles or guiding pillars that should never change, no matter the vision of the company might change or the strategy that change, but those same things are there. So, we came up with it's interesting. So I'll also talk about our mission statement, because we had the hardest time writing it. And we did it after about 10 years. And it's to create unmatched experiences for our customers, employees. And it goes back to that original idea that, creating everything we do, centering everything we do around employee happiness and customer happiness. And we were working with this outside person, and they're like, when you figure it out, you'll be like, well, that's just what we do. And we're like, that's not, it was always there, but you don't. So we were coming up with mission statements that were like 2 pages long. Mm-hmm. And it took us like 6 or 7 months. And then we had this aha moment. So my point being is that was the core foundation of what we were founding on. We just didn't realize we were living it. And then it took us a while. Once we articulated, it was so easy then to live it after that. So, and then let's talk about core values, because this is really important even when it's remote, your core values should be integrated into everything that you do, how you act, how you hire, how you reward, it should be in all of those. So I'll try and give you an example. So living a balanced life is one of our core values. And I mentioned it before, it was one of the things that we started with. It is at the center of kind of a wheel we have of our core values. It is part of being remote. So living a balanced life is, we allow people the flexibility to manage their day. So they don't have to be at a desk 8 to 5. If they need to go take their kid to the park or whatever in the middle of the day, or do yoga class, we trust them to go do that. We want them to live a balanced life. And we expect all of our leaders to lead that way. And so they have, we screen for leaders that respect that. And we then build it into our policies. Like we have an unlimited PTO policy. So if you are doing your core values right, they should be embedded in you should see them in everything that you do. Does that help?
It does, yeah, absolutely. And can you recite your core values?
Sure. So, living a balanced life is at the center, like I mentioned. Our North Star, we like to say, is delivery excellence. So, if you're not doing great work for your clients, then we might as well go out of business. Integrity. Well, it's easier said than done, right? It's
Right.
integrity and transparency, basically. Innovation, stewardship. So that is, we are trying to be a multi-generational company. And so we're trying to leave it better for the next group of people to run the company, but it also means stewardship in the communities that we serve. And so that means we do a lot of volunteering and give back to make those communities better places to be. And then I think there's one other one that I'm trying to remember right now. It'll come to me in a second. And so the last thing I will tell you, the more important thing to tell you, is what we learned. If you make culture important, as we started to grow, we were worried that we would lose our culture. And so we did a couple of things. I went and I talked to companies that had scaled their organization and maintained their culture to like thousands of people. And I was trying to ask them what the secret was. And the secret is, if you hire leaders that match your culture and live your culture, you can scale the organization to any size. And so we take a long period of time to hire our leaders and develop our leaders because we want them to reflect that culture. The other thing that we did is we developed our own culture training. So when a new hire joins us, I'll send them to culture training. It is a day and a half, and it is all about our culture and how to live it. And we tell lots of stories. We do fun games. It's not like reading from an HR manual. It is about, and it's expensive because we take our leaders out of their day jobs and then we go to train people because we think it's that valuable or that important to us.
How many employees do you have?
We have 1,100 consultants in the US and India.
Wow. All right. So that's a sizable amount. And do you guys ever all get together for one all hands?
So we can't be India and US, we can't. Yeah. But what we do is in India, we have a party where we take everybody and their significant other. And we've been doing that in the US for 15 years. So we do, and then in the US, we get everybody together 3 times a year. And it's, like I said before, it's designed all around connection. So we usually build in some sort of community service into it. And then the one we do in the winter is just all fun. There's no business. And it's all about enjoying each other and celebrating. And so we go somewhere fun every year, and they can take their significant others. And so to give you my favorite one, so we've been, all over Cancun, Bahamas, Vegas, San Diego. It changes every year. But, to give you an example, we flew down to New Orleans and we went a day early, and we took like 5 busloads, and we went to fix up a community center that had been underwater for 30 days after Katrina. And so we had these 5 busloads of people, and we descend on this place and we work all day, and people would just drive by in the community and like get out of their car and hug you and thank you. And then we went back to the hotel, and there was like this commotion going on. I couldn't understand what was going on in front of the hotel. And I get out, and the whole hotel had lined, the hotel staff had lined the entranceway, and they were clapping as we got off the buses and came inside. And so, it gives me chills to talk about it still to this day. I can't measure, that's super expensive to do. And I can't measure the ROI on that for culture, but I know the bonds that we built and the stories that we still tell to this day and how much closer we were because of it. It matters.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff, man. Those are inseparable bricks. As far as the jumping back a bit, the unlimited PTO, Dave, you can jump out here and tell what happened with our unlimited PTO program, and then I'd like to ask Larry what went wrong with ours.
Yeah, I think the issue was just we had an employee that abused it to a point where it was setting a bad precedent. And then because I was challenging this employee on it, it was causing other employees to then question, well, if he's not honoring unlimited PTO, what else is he not going to honor? And it caused a culture rot. And so I was like, you know what? It's just easier if we just put the rules in place and let people plan their, things based. Because initially, this was in the time early in our career where we didn't have processes written down. We didn't have our culture written, our values written down. We didn't have those processes in place. And so it was murky and muddy. And so it was just, that was the evolution of getting us to, all right, we need to write it down. It needs to be in an employee, a process document, and they need to be able to refer to it, and they need to know what everything means and how everything operates. And so, I mean, overall, I think that was a good thing that we had to go through to get to. But I'm not for unlimited PTO because we hire a lot of young employees. We're a training organization, and we get the college grad, and they haven't established their working habits yet. And we're here to teach those working habits so that when they go on to their next whatever that is, that they're good employees, they're good workers.
I could see you have a different model or a different workforce. I could see where you guys that might. For us, we tend to have a much more experienced workforce that have been there, done that for a longer period of time, and we do hire some younger people. So I'll tell you. So we've had people abuse it too, and you manage through it with them, basically. But what I'll tell you is it's interesting. After one thing we saw was people were like, they didn't believe it. And they're like, no, really, what is the number? I want to know the number of days that I can take. And we're like, no, just, be within reason, and do what you need to do. What we found, and this is probably 10 years of data now, people take the same exact amount of vacation as before this unlimited policy as they do now, at a macro level across our company.
How did you manage through the employee that was abusing it?
So it's on an individual level, and trying to understand. Usually what I will find is there's something going on in their life that is, it's a bigger deal than the unlimited vacation policy. And it's trying to work with them and figure out what those things are and figure out if that's something that we can address. As an organization, we try to be compassionate about that stuff. And, if it's we just rarely, I'll also tell you, people ask about, I don't think I could trust my employees to work remote. How do I know that they're not, goofing off basically and giving me 5 hours of work? It has just been a non-issue over 20 years. And I will tell you, in the circumstances where it was an issue, there was always some really extenuating circumstance, like a mental health issue or something like that. We don't even have to worry about it to this day. Does that?
Yeah. With the pandemic and shutting everything down last year, I think we were ahead of the curve on that. And we shut down the office before, everyone else was doing it. And I think now I don't care as much. I mean, if unlimited PTO is right now, is the work getting done? Is customer complaints bubbling up? If they are, to me, that's my warning. That's my signal to say, all right, let's look at this account. Why are these? You're not getting your work done. You're not meeting the deadlines, and then we have a problem. So, I definitely think we've been thrust into a more trusting environment. I liked the office because I liked the camaraderie, and you see other people working hard, and you see, the hunger, and that's what we want to encourage. But now we're definitely in a no office future, and so John and I have been talking, what are we doing with these offices? We each have an office. I'm in Jacksonville, he's in St. Pete, and we're spending a good chunk of money on offices. And so I think but the crazy thing is I started looking into the cost per square foot, assuming that I would have seen a drop, and they have not dropped at all. And I either haven't hit the wave of leases expiring, or we're about to.
Yeah, a lot of the corporate leases are about 7 years long on average, and so you're not going to see it yet. But it's, we're working with a lot of companies, and they're all like, I mean, that's where the big money savings is. And so they're looking at reducing their office footprint by at least 50%. But they some of them can't right now. They're like, hey, we're stuck with this.
Right.
But I think you will see, I think you'll see, I would not want to be in commercial real estate right now.
No.
That's so. And speaking to that, would you recommend, like, let's say Dave and myself go in some co-working space, like, because I enjoy the change of state, right? Like, I need that. So yeah, do you consult and recommend, scenarios like that?
Yeah. So what we see most people doing is designing for employees for their what they call working ecosystem. And so the idea is each individual is a little bit different of how they like to work. And so some people would prefer to be at home all the time. It's kind of funny. We had one employee, and she had a co-working site, she paid to do it for the same reasons that you were just talking about. And she found after the pandemic, she's like, I got to dress and put on makeup and I got to drive there. I'm good, not doing this anymore. So the example that I talk about, how the individual works, I think you'll see it where some days they'll work from home. Some days they might go to a co-working site if they're far from the home office, and then they might go into the home office. And then when they're at the home office, the guys that are really, I'm not a space design person, but the guys that are really leading edge on this are like, they're just redesigning that space for more we space for connection and collaboration. But it's like, you want to give people a choice. If they want to work on the couch, they can work on the couch. If they want to work in the soundproof phone booth, they can do that. If they want to sit at the coffee bar, or if they're having a meeting and everybody's coming into the office. So I think you'll see just a lot of options for the situation that you're currently working in and what works best for you as an individual.
Got it. Yeah. And then are there like recommendations based on, like rates per employee, what you would budget for a specific office space?
Yeah. So the numbers are, significant. I see some of them quoted. It's like, let's say like 20 grand a year for an office space for, physical, you have an office space that people go to with a desk, and 2,000 a year or something like that if the person's working remotely. This is a little bit of debate. A lot of companies, some do it and some don't. Depends on your workforce. They'll provide a stipend as part of their policy if you're going to work from home. And there are definitely ergonomic issues. If somebody is, I wrote an article on this for Forbes and interviewed a professor that's been studying it. There are definitely health advantages to making sure you have the right setup in order to, be safe essentially. And what's the right word? You want everybody to ergonomically be correct and maintain their health.
Yeah, I agree with that. I remember I went to is a kinesiologist, massage therapist type person and whatnot. And they said that the guy that was just there before me turned his desk and he would just turn and type. And he did that for like 30 years. And he was deformed based on the way that he sat. And they've been working with him for years to remove that deformity. And it freaked me out. Like I was like, okay, my monitor is going to be at a certain height. My desk, like everything. So I'm a firm believer of what you just said regarding your interview with that professor. Yeah. Now, is there anything that we haven't covered today that you think the world should know?
Oh, goodness. Let me think about that for a second. Well, this is more speaking to corporations. I saw what we're seeing today is, I think if you're doubting or hopeful that everybody's going back into the office, I don't think that's going to happen. And I would start to be putting in place kind of the backup plans or preparing for that to be reality, that we're going to live in this hybrid world going forward and be prepared for it.
Got it. And what would you recommend to leaders to take that first step in doing that?
So there,
you'd say buy your book, man, whatever you want.
Well, I could say that. I think that's one piece of that. What we've learned is there's a there is a methodology to doing it and doing it right. And some people think all I got to do is install Zoom or Teams and I'm done. And so what I would recommend to people is it's multifaceted. It's the technology, it's the tools, it's the process, it's the how you lead virtually, and to not skimp on it, but to think holistically about it and expect an investment to do it right.
Got it. So go all in.
That's a better way to say it.
All right. Is there anything that you would like to promote or plug? This is your space to do that.
No. So you mentioned the book. So it's it's called Office Option: How to Build a Connected Culture with Virtual Teams. All the proceeds go to improving the digital divide to a charity nonprofit called Launch Code. And what they do is they train people that don't have tech skills and are disadvantaged on how to become technology workers. And so I love what they're doing and happy to, contribute to this world being a better place through that. So that's what I would like to promote.
Right on. We'll make sure that that's in the show notes. And then last thing, how can people get a hold of you?
Yep. The easiest way is larryenglish.net.
Boom. Man with his own URL. I love that. Awesome, Larry. Thank you so much. It's been fantastic. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Hope you enjoyed our episode. Please subscribe and review wherever you can. And if you would like to join the Digital Mastermind, go ahead and shoot me an email at jon@digitalmastermind.com or visit us at digitalmastermind.com. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye now.